I saved every penny to buy a house, but they secretly crushed my dream. The cold truth behind the door. The house was quiet, too quiet in fact. I stood there, the keys to my new home clutched tightly in my hand, staring at the front door. It should have been a moment of celebration. After months of planning and preparation, my dream home was finally mine. Yet as I unlocked the door, a chill ran down my spine. I should have been happy. I should have felt relief that I was finally moving out of my in-laws' house and into a place of my own. But something wasn't right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was an unease that followed me as I stepped inside. The air inside felt cold despite the warmth of the day outside. My in-laws had offered to help me with the move, which had surprised me. Helen, my mother-in-law, had never been particularly kind to me over the years. Her comments about my age, about how I was 9 years older than Gabriel, her son, had worn me down. But for some reason she'd been acting almost nice lately. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have realized this was all part of her plan. But like always, I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had finally accepted me. I moved carefully through the house, inspecting each room. Everything was in its place just as I had imagined. The furniture was arranged perfectly and sunlight streamed in through the windows, casting a warm glow. Yet there was still that nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, telling me that something was terribly wrong. Helen had been strangely insistent on helping with the move. She'd even come with me to meet the contractor several times, offering her opinion on things I hadn't asked for. It made me uncomfortable, but I hadn't wanted to cause a scene. After all, we were family, or at least we were supposed to be. It was just then that I heard the front door open behind me. I spun around, expecting to see Gabriel, but it wasn't him. Instead, it was Michael, my father-in-law, smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. "Everything looks great," he said, stepping inside. "Ready to move the rest of the stuff?" Before I could answer, Helen appeared in the doorway, holding a box. "I hope you don't mind," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "I brought a few things over early." I forced a smile, trying to shake off the unease. "Sure, that's fine." They started moving things into the house. Furniture, boxes, and even some decorations that I hadn't seen before. My confusion grew as more and more of their belongings appeared. "What's all this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Helen smiled at me, her eyes cold. "Oh, didn't Gabriel tell you? We'll be living here too." The words hit me like a slap. I couldn't have heard her right. "What?" I stammered, my heart racing. Helen's smile widened. "Yes, we've decided that it would be best for all of us to live together. To help each other out." I stood there, frozen, as the realization dawned on me. This wasn't just my home, it was theirs too. Without my knowledge, without my consent, they had planned this all along. I wanted to scream, to tell them to leave, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I could only watch as they moved their things in, taking over what was supposed to be my new life. Gabriel had been distant for months, leaving me to handle everything on my own. I thought this house would be a fresh start for us, a place where we could rebuild our family. But now it seemed like that dream had been a lie. When I finally found my voice, it was barely a whisper. "You can't just move in without telling me." Helen looked at me, her smile never faltering. "Oh, but we already have, and Gabriel agrees that it's for the best." The betrayal cut deep. Gabriel, the man I had loved and trusted, had been part of this all along. He hadn't even had the decency to tell me. I felt sick to my stomach, the weight of everything crashing down on me at once. I should have seen this coming from the moment I married Gabriel. Helen had always been in control. She manipulated him, controlled him, and now she was doing the same to me. But this was different. This was a calculated move to take over my life entirely. I left the house that day without saying another word. I needed time to think, to figure out what I was going to do. But as I drove away, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them win. The next few days were a blur. I stayed with a friend, trying to wrap my head around what had happened. Gabriel called a few times, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear his excuses. I wasn't ready to forgive him for betraying me like this. It wasn't until I received a call from the bank that the full scope of their plan became clear. The mortgage for the house was in my name. Helen and Michael had assumed they could move in and take control, but they hadn't realized one crucial detail. I held the financial power. I returned to the house a week later, determined to confront them. I walked through the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. Helen and Michael were in the living room, acting as if nothing was wrong. "We need to talk," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Helen looked up from her book, raising an eyebrow. "About what?" "This house," I said, my hands clenched into fists. "It's mine. You can't just take it from me." Helen's smile faltered for the first time. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the mortgage is in my name," I said, stepping closer. "You don't own this house." "I do, and I want you out." The room fell silent. Michael looked between us, confusion flickering across his face. Helen, however, quickly recovered her composure. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, standing up. "We're family. We're supposed to help each other." "Family?" I spat, my anger boiling over. "You've done nothing but manipulate me since the day I married Gabriel. You think I don't see what you're doing? You're trying to take everything from me." Helen's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw the true malice behind her smile. "You don't know what you're talking about," she hissed. "Gabriel agreed to this. Gabriel doesn't get to make that decision." I snapped. "This is my house, and if you don't leave, I'll make sure you regret it." Helen stared at me for a long moment, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out of the room. I stood there, my chest heaving, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I had won for now. But I knew this wasn't over. Helen wouldn't give up that easily. Over the next few weeks, I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. Gabriel tried to reach out, but I refused to speak to him. I couldn't trust him anymore, not after what he had done. My focus was on protecting my son, Sean, and making sure that Helen and Michael couldn't manipulate their way back into our lives. It wasn't long before the first legal threat arrived. Helen had filed a claim accusing me of fraud and trying to take the house away from them. I had anticipated this, of course. She was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. But what she hadn't counted on was that I had been preparing too. I had all the documents, proof that the mortgage was in my name, that I had paid for the house, and that they had no legal right to stay there. The court case dragged on for months, but in the end, the verdict was clear. The house belonged to me. Helen and Michael were ordered to leave immediately, and Gabriel, who had remained conspicuously absent throughout the whole process, was left with nothing. Thought that would be the end of it, that once they were out of my life I could finally start over. But the damage had already been done. My trust in Gabriel was shattered, and my marriage was over. The divorce was finalized soon after, and I moved on, focusing on rebuilding my life with Sean. But even after all that had happened, there was still a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that Helen wasn't done with me yet. She had lost the house, but I knew she was still out there, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. I stayed vigilant, watching for any sign that she might try to come back. I changed the locks, installed security cameras, and even moved to a new city to put as much distance between us as possible. Years passed, and slowly the memories of that time began to fade. I found happiness again, this time with a man who treated me with the respect and love I had always deserved. We bought a new house, this time a home that was truly ours with no strings attached. But every now and then I would catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow, a figure in the distance, and I would wonder if it was her, if Helen was still watching, still waiting for her chance to strike again. I never let my guard down, because one thing I had learned from all of this was that people like Helen never truly disappear. They may fade into the background, but they are always lurking, waiting for the moment when they can step back into your life and take control again. And when that moment came, I would be ready.